My name is Jessica Chavez, and I'm Vice President of Education and the Chief Learning and Community Partnership Officer. And I just hope you all had an amazing session as you guys are getting seated for our next keynote. While everything is still fresh in your minds, I'm going to welcome President Raj Echambati, the 10th President of Illinois Institute of Technology. He has chartered a transformative path for the university using these 4 principles: strengthening economic mobility, reimagining education for learners at all stages of life, empowering human-centered technologies, and exemplifying purpose-driven citizenship. So under his visionary leadership, Illinois Tech has launched the groundbreaking Elevate program, a unique initiative emphasizing job readiness and experiential learning, coupled with personalized academic and career mentorship. As a result, the university witnessed its largest class of first-year undergraduates in history, yes, and a substantial increase in new graduate students. During his time as a Senior Associate Dean of Strategic Innovation at Guy's College of Business, University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, I'm also new to Chicago, y'all, so bear with me, played a pivotal role in spearheading the acclaimed Scale Online MBA, IMBA program, recognized as one of the most groundbreaking educational innovations of the past decade. Echambati's commitment to accessibility and quality technology education extends globally, with Illinois Tech partnerships with Coursera to offer fully online, industry-aligned programs for their exceptional dedication to college access and career success. Bloomberg Philanthropies recognizes Illinois Tech as one of the prestigious American Talent Initiative high flyer institutions. Before his tenure at Northeastern University, Raj Echambati held the position of Dean at the D'Amour McKim School of Business. We are so honored to have him here to share his insights and expertise with us at MSI Education Summit. Please welcome to the stage, Dr. Raj Echambati.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Fantastic, that's nice energy, thank you. Thank you, Jessica, for the kind introduction, and I want to thank all of you for being here, and thank you to the Chicagoland, for those involved in the Chicagoland STEM Summit for Equity and Excellence for inviting me here. It's a true honor. And I also want to thank our hosts, the Museum of Science and Industry, for enabling this event and organizing this event. And of course, the CEO is not here today. She had to travel. But if she was here, I would have asked her a question: where did you get your MBA from? And I know the answer. She's from the Northeastern's D'Amour McKim School of Business, where I was dean once. And I would have said to her, I take full credit for your successes. But she's not here, so hopefully Malik and other people will communicate this. But on a serious note, the accomplishments and the difference she has made in the last few years has been stunning. And so as I was preparing for these remarks, I was looking at the STEM Opportunity Alliance's mission in order to rooted in equity, inclusion, and excellence, in order to power progress, innovation, and prosperity. And that's exactly what our aspirations are at the Illinois Institute of Technology, and I'm going to call it Illinois Tech from now on. And so much so that I was so excited this morning as I left home. I said to my wife, the values between SOA and Illinois Tech are so aligned, and I feel knowledgeable to speak about this topic. And she said, good for you. And then she said, but when has lack of knowledge ever stopped you from saying something? So having eaten humble pie for breakfast and lunch, here I am. And but it is very important for me to talk to you a little bit about Illinois Tech's story, our founding story. We were founded in 1890 on a very noble mission to educate students from all walks of life. The story goes as follows. Minister Frank Wakely Gonzalez gets up in his church congregation and tells his congregation about a concern that he has. He is concerned that the citizens of the south side of Chicago are not getting educational opportunities and that they would not fit in with the emerging industrial society. So he stands up and says, if only I had $1 million, I would educate the children of the Chicago's meat packers and steel workers and machinists so that they can become the engineers, architects, and physicists of the industrial society. Thank God there was somebody in the congregation with $1 million, Philip Danforth Armour, and our institute was born. We are the comprehensive technology-based institution in Chicago and the second largest producer of technologists from the state of Illinois. And there is a reason why I said this story, because apart from the fact it is inspiring, we just launched a $1 billion sermon last year. And so as you are leaving, I'm going to ask you if you have $1 billion to spare as we build the next generation of the university and so on. But on a serious note, the broader thing that I wanted to emphasize to you is for the last 130 years, we have always measured ourselves by how many people we include rather than how many people we exclude. And that has been a very important part of our ethos, if you will. And you know, obviously we focus on relevance-inspired research and we are focused on the community and so on. But the real reason I brought up that story is the challenges that we are facing today at the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution is exactly the same as was faced by Minister Frank Wakely Gonzalez during the transition to the industrial society. With the advent of artificial intelligence and machine learning, with the other technologies that are pervading, ever pervasive in our lives, the questions that people are asking are exactly the same. How do we educate our students so that they can become impactful leaders for the emergent economy? How do we educate our workforce, train them, reskill them, upskill them? But more importantly, how do we do them in an affordable manner so that we don't have the educational haves and educational have-nots? And that is absolutely the question for the day. And the solution is very clear: STEM education. But this comment of mine always raises hackles. People always say, wait a minute, not everything has to be STEM. And my argument there is not, you know, I'll get into the whole aspect of holistic education shortly, but to me, when you think about jobs, forget even jobs that are specialized technology jobs. All jobs involve technology now, right? Think about, I mean, I was in a coffee shop the other day, and are you also upset about tipping everywhere nowadays? You know, you give the money, and all they have to do is they say, okay, one cafe Americano, and you know, you have to swipe your card and tip for that, you know, anyway. So, but my broader point, I get very irritated by small things, as you can see, but all jobs are going to involve technology. I'm going to give you two examples. We are now focused on healthcare at Illinois Tech. And the statistic that is chilling is 75% of tomorrow's healthcare jobs are not here today yet. But it's all going to be about technology. We are also focused on advanced manufacturing. So we just launched the Advanced Manufacturing Center with DMG Mori. So I was in a factory shop, and they said to me about 20 years ago that shop floor would be populated by 25 people. Now it is managed by 2. with a programmable logic controller and so on. So the fact of the matter is our jobs are transitioning to technology jobs, and it is extraordinarily important that we educate our students and upskill and reskill our workforce in terms of technology, because that is extraordinarily important to me for an equitable future. Not to mention economic development and national security, because that's one of the major thrust areas that we have at Illinois Tech. But unless otherwise, we educate our students on STEM, there is a crisis brewing in our country. There is a divide between the educational haves and have-nots. There is a very chilling statistic that from Bridget Long, who's the dean of the Graduate School of Education at Harvard, and she says less than 20% of high school graduates today are equipped to pursue STEM majors. Okay, we see this every day in our jobs and so on. But if you think through it very carefully, who gets left behind? The people who get left behind are people already grappling with economic disadvantages, and that's why it is imperative for us to handle this issue. And it is wonderful that you have this summit in order to focus on what I think is a very critical and timely issue. Let's do a very quick thought experiment. If I ask you, what is the one grand challenge in your mind that our civilization has to grapple with over the next 15, 20 years? All of you will have your individual lists. You will talk about climate change and sustainability, clean energy, poverty, fraying of democratic values, or political polarization. All of it is true. But I would argue the fundamental problem we as a society face today is what I call as wasted human capacity. Right? If you have human capacity that is trained, then all problems are surmountable. One of the amazing things about universities, we are talent studios. We ensure that the society doesn't lose out on the Marie Curies and the Albert Einsteins and the Martin Luther King Jr., et cetera. So I'm going to give you a few anecdotes to tell you about human capacity. The first story, I went to, as soon as I took office a couple of years ago, I went to an organization that caters to citizens of, think of it as immigrants and first-generation immigrants, first-generation Americans. And they introduced me to a young woman who was going to college. She had just finished her sophomore year. I congratulated her. She was a science major. And as she left, the CEO turned to me and said, "Oh, by the way, she got a full ride to this university 2 years ago, but she refused to go." And I said, "Why? This is an amazing university, full ride, housing scholarship, academic scholarship." He said, "Well, her parents are immigrants who are not fluent in English. Therefore, she felt that she needed to be here because the money she makes part-time helps them, and she worried that they would descend into poverty." And this organization was kind enough and generous enough to give them her $12,000 that enabled her, no questions asked, that enabled her to go and pursue her science-based education. Think about this. The second anecdote I'm going to tell you is a story that was told to me by a friend of mine, Dan Avida, who was on the board of Coursera, whose wife founded Coursera, the online platform that reaches 100 million plus people. So he's talking at a university. One of the young women comes there to him, and she says, "I saw on your slide your association with Coursera. Can you talk about it?" And he talks about his association. And she says, "Oh my God, Coursera is the reason why I'm here." This young woman is from Africa. And she is, apparently her school didn't have the right kind of opportunities for her educational opportunities. So she uses Coursera to educate herself. And that education enabled her to come here. And the last story I'm going to say is that of my friend Hayden Noel at the University of Illinois, who has a program called College for a Day. Brings in students. The first day I was there, and he asked these 40 kids, young kids, 13, 14, 15-year-old kids. They all live about 2-3 miles away around the University of Illinois. And he asked them, how many of you have stepped foot on this campus? 75% of them had never stepped foot on campus. How many of you think you are ready to go to the University of Illinois? Literally 99% of them said they are not interested. And then when you probe, it is not that they are not interested, it's just that they did not know. And of course, they have a full day at the University of Illinois. At the end of the day, they even have a graduation ceremony, etc. And all of them invariably go on to college. And one of them, he came to me and said to me, this is one of the brightest students I've ever seen in my life. This is the 14, 15-year-old student. And we tracked the student. The student was not interested in going to college. And we just said to the student, you're fine, you're good enough to go, you're talented, and so on. And I just heard that the student went to the College of Agricultural College and Consumer Economics, I think, ACES it's called, and graduated. The reason I'm telling you all these anecdotes is very simple. These are the success stories. Unless otherwise you have a foolproof method of ensuring accessibility, these are exceptions. Which is where we need as a society to go forward and say, let us build a foolproof system of accessibility and affordability so that these children, these students, do not get lost in the shuffle. Can you imagine what happens when you have these bright students with a lot of potential not given the opportunity? And somebody said once, talent is equally distributed, but opportunities are not. And so how do we build a system that is foolproof and that enables accessibility? And to me, the answer comes to reimagine education. The first point when it comes to reimagining education is enabling access. Okay, so I want to give you a history, because when you think about enabling access, we need to, as entities, whether it is K through 12 or higher education, we need to rethink how we offer programs. As a government, we need to start thinking about policies. And as importantly, we always need to ask the question, how do we bring in more population? So to give you a perspective, in 1870, there were 60,000 people in higher ed in the United States out of a population of 330 million, about 0.2%. Today, that number is about 20 million in college as opposed to a population of 350 million. So our progress has been there. Of course, there's been a lot of painful spots along the way and so on. But when you look at history, we brought in newer populations, starting with Mount Holyoke College and Seven Sisters. Mount Holyoke was in 1837. We expanded it to women. And then after the Emancipation Declaration with the HBCUs, we expanded it to Black Americans and immigrants at the turn of the century in 1900. Again, after Kennedy loosened the immigration reforms in 1963, we had more immigrants come in. So along the way, so that is one part of it, bringing in newer populations. The second is newer programs. Till the Morrill Act of 1863, we all had liberal arts education, very elitist. And then we had technology education. And then business at the turn of the century, et cetera, new programs. But last but not the least, also new policies. When you think about the Morrill Act signed by Lincoln, or the GI Bill of 1945, Pell Grant, which to me happens to be one of the best pieces of legislation ever. this was in 1965, we expanded the populations, we enabled people to do it, and so on. And what we need to start thinking about is exactly the same thing. For far too long, we think of a talent pipeline, students as monoliths. At 18, they finish high school, they come in, and we provide a one-size-fits-all. I want to give you some statistics. Today, when you think about people over 18 years of age, we have about 255 million people in the United States, out of which 90 million people have bachelor's degree or over, bachelor's, master's, doctoral, or professional degrees. 42 million people have some college, no degree. That is, in my opinion, wasted human capital. 25 million community college students. And what the promise of community college has always been to provide education so that, the community college education so that they transfer over. Less than 25% of community college students transfer over to four-year college. We have close to about 75 million high school students who just stopped at high school. So think about, we need to figure out ways. Instead of saying we have 20 million college students, we need to ask ourselves, how about the non-consumers of college education? We need to start providing access to those students instead of thinking about learners as a zero-sum game. You come from high school, you come into community colleges and at a four-year college, that's the pathway to go. That's the first thing I would say, enable access and think creatively about this access. The second point, I've already touched upon it, I would say is find out diversity in pathways. For far too long, again, we think of the student groups as monolithic and we provide them with one size fits all. We need to start thinking of them as braided rivers, as one of my friends once said. People have different motivations, different life circumstances. Can we start thinking about accommodating these students in different ways? So for example, for us at Illinois Tech, I don't want you to think, oh my God, behold the glory, there is me, but thank you. We scholarship almost everybody that comes in. Jessica was talking about the ATI High Flyer Award that we received, and that was fundamentally because of our unprecedented success with college access. 37% of our students are in the bottom 4 income categories. To give you a perspective, if you look at very elite schools, that's in the low teens. For peer schools of ours, that number is about 18 to 19%. For us, it is 37%. Our employment rate is 92%. So we have phenomenal college access and college success, if you will. But despite this, despite the fact that we scholarship fairly heavily, there are still students who say to us, it is very difficult for us to come to college. So what we did, this year we launched a program called Ascend, where we said, first year, I know you're ready to come to our college, four-year college, but do it. Stay with us in the dorms. But first year, do certain courses at the city colleges of Chicago. So we can actually reduce your debt burden, if you will. But more importantly, you can also learn to belong in college. We'll make sure our learning environments are right enough, are right for you in order to belong. We launched 4 affordable degrees on Coursera platform, on the online platform. And I know Tony is there. Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it, from Illinois Tech. And when I talked about online program to a president's group, they said to me, oh, online is not true education, you know. And these are the things we need to walk away from. You know, it's not a one-size-fits-all. My answer to that person was restricting access for technological education to a select few that come to our campuses is by definition exclusionary. True inclusion is about educating anyone, anywhere, any place, anytime. And that is where we need to go as a society. So understand the diversity in pathways. What a cruel twist of fate if we tell somebody who has to work after high school to support the family to say, no, I can't provide you educational opportunities because, this is what we expect education to be, So that's what I mean by changing the pathways and enabling innovative pathways so that students have opportunities to pursue their goals and aspirations. And last but not the least, when we talk about reimagining education, it is about redefining the value proposition. And to me, there are three important things here. One, meld the rigor of the classroom education with the relevance of the real world. I have to tell you a story here. I was talking about, I'm unabashedly about employment. I run a technology school. It is about real life experiences for our students. And I promote our employment rates, that's what I need to do. And so one of the presidents came in and said, you are focusing too much on employment. You realize education is about enlightenment. And I said, unless otherwise you're Buddha. I said it in my internal mind. That's my internal voice coming through. Enlightenment for a lot of us comes after employment and supporting our families and supporting ourselves and so on. So how do we meld the rigor and the relevance of the real world? Please, higher educational institutions, it's not corrupting your students. It is actually enhancing their relevance so that they can become impactful students, impactful leaders, and people that matter. Melding, there are many ways of melding it. Obviously, we can work with employers to say, okay, what should our curriculum be and so on. So that's my first point as far as value proposition is concerned. Second, especially for students who are coming in from lower income and middle class backgrounds, it is extraordinarily important that we start emphasizing experiential learning as a connective tissue between education and gainful employment or subsequent move into graduate school and so on. And last but not the least, and this is providing holistic education. When we think about technology education at Illinois Tech, we want technologists with EQ. Far too often we focus too much on technology education, and if our students who are well-versed with technology education go out and compete with robots, they're not going to win. When they are going to win, and when they are going to become robot-proof, is when they meld their technological skills with human-centered skills, such as creativity, entrepreneurialism, critical thinking. That is what we are trying to do at Illinois Tech. And one of the, as I'm talking about this value proposition, there is a movement afoot that you would have heard. It's called tear the paper ceiling. It is fundamentally, the premise is college is not worth it, and therefore it is actually a hurdle to gainful employment. Therefore, we need to tear the paper diploma and imbue people with skills so that they can go on to get employment, etc. I'm totally against it. Of course, you will know that as a university president, I cannot endorse that. But there is a real reason why I don't like it. It is like killing a butterfly with a bazooka. You may say, wait a minute, why butterfly, anyway, I wanted a bee and a bee there, But think about it from a serious point of view. Just like any other complex problem, we are not providing nuanced solutions here, right? I mean, yes, there are serious concerns with higher education. The affordability crisis, deep questioning of value. There are obviously we need to bring down, enhance the accessibility by bringing down the costs and so on. But the solution is not to say college education is not required. One of the great things about the United States is the fact our gross enrollment ratio is very high. The number of people who go to college divided by the total number of high school students, that number is very, very high for us. It's about close to, it's in the upper 70s. Even for Western Europe, that's usually in the 60s. I come from India. India's gross enrollment ratio is 25%. Less than 1 in 4 from high school go on to college. Track the history of gross enrollment ratio and your economic development. You will see a positive slope. When you say, I don't want college, we don't need people to go to college, etc., beyond issues of national security, etc., we are actually hurting ourselves in the long run. That is why I say the cure, the solution is far worse than the problem that we are trying to address. So what is the right thing? Is from a higher education point of view, we need to accept our critics' point of view and say, let's take the good points that they are talking about. We do have some problems, but can we marry the training and skills that the tear the paper movement is talking about and marry it with education? One of the problems that I have when people say it's all skills based, okay, let's say that somebody goes and acquires skills in cloud computing. 5 years from now, 7 years from now, cloud computing goes away. What happens to them? But on the other hand, if they know critical thinking, if they are well versed in well-rounded education, etc., that means they'll have the curiosity to evolve and learn and become better with education and so on. So my broader point is we need to start thinking about not eliminating a degree, but amplifying the possibilities of the degree by being innovative. Can we start saying, okay, take short-term certificates, and you can stitch the short-term certificates over a 6 or 7 year period with a degree. Those are the solutions that we need. And to me, this goes back to the whole reimagining education so that we deliver value for our students at every stage. And I'm going to close with this. When you think about great renewals in the last 50, 60 years in the United States, 2 cities come to mind. Silicon Valley, the San Francisco, Palo Alto, Mountain View area, and Pittsburgh. They all redefined themselves by organizing around technology. If you think about Pittsburgh was left for dead in 1970s. And look at where Pittsburgh is today. That fundamentally happened because of the percentage of college graduates. Percentage of college graduates in a city when it goes up, in a state when it goes up, it does 3 things. 1, it provides downstream consequences for people without college degrees. So you need restaurants, you need dry cleaning business, you need other kinds of services around large companies and so on. So that is one part. Second part, when you have more number of college graduates, technology adoption is faster. Research shows that, which is why when you are talking about STEM Opportunity Alliance, etc., we all need to talk about enhancing the degree population. Last but not the least is human capital externality. What that means is when you start increasing the number of college graduates, all the other complementarities actually go up in a state and in a city or a state, which effectively means the economic development is far, far, far more robust, which is why I feel as universities, we need to start thinking about rethinking our value proposition and more importantly, ensure that our degrees provide the value. In other words, we should be in the business of education that matters rather than being in the business of degrees. So anyway, I'm going to stop here at this point in time. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And if there is anything at all I can do, let me know. But please continue to be the difference makers that you are. Our society needs you. Our state needs you, our country needs you, and of course the world needs you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.